Yeah, and I think just in terms of feedback, I'd love your reactions rather than your feed, not rather than, but it's like really like that, really leaned into that, got a bit distracted there. That really worked for me.
Okay.
Like just
Yeah,
like that.
but not during the flow. Just I'll
No,
wait for the end. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
thanks, man. I'm
In fact, it might even be useful for me to just think about it, even watch the recording again, and come back to you a bit later. I'm not sure how much immediate feedback I'll have, but
I
let's
agree.
let's see how we go.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Yeah,
It's really good because
yeah,
obviously you can give kind of visceral, immediate feedback,
yeah,
or
yeah.
just let it permeate. So yeah, I agree. Just gonna
Good.
do this, and I'm going to get rid of that WhatsApp vibe. Um,
Okay, I'll set you up. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Simon Eakin. Too soon.
not yeah, not yet. Hang on.
Simon, Simon.
All right. So this way there'll be glitches, but it's the gist of it I want to get across. Okay.
Okay.
Good timer. So, ladies and gentlemen, the art of courage, helping brave leaders future-proof their teams by transforming fears into opportunities. So, I want to take you back. I'm 2 years old. It's 1969. My father is a clergyman, and we live in a small village called Ilmington in Warwickshire, not far from Stratford-on-Avon, where William Shakespeare hails from. And on this particular day, my dad was delivering a service, and we walked a short distance to the country church. And the Bishop of Coventry, his kind of ultra boss, a man by the name of Bishop Cuthbert Bardsley, was coming to lunch and coming to kind of be part of the service. I was really excited because he had this beautiful old 1960s Volvo. Do you remember those ones with like the chrome hubcaps? And I'm sure it was a maroon color. Anyway, we went back home and I waited on the doorstep for my dad and the bishop to return in the car. And sure enough, I saw the car approaching and I was wild with excitement. 2 years old.
Mm.
How I remember this with such vivid clarity, I don't know. I ran towards the car. The bishop put the car into reverse. I slipped and fell, and my leg went under the back wheel. It went over my leg, and of course, now there was pandemonium. People running, picking me up. I was taken in someone's arms through the house. It was a long corridor of worried-looking adults to a bath at the end. When I was put in the bath, there were 3 doctors at the drinks party. And I was investigated, and it turned out actually there wasn't much damage because the give of the gravel and the softness of my young bones hadn't really made a big difference. But something happened in that event that I realize now is that as human beings, often things happen and we build a story or we make meaning of things that happen. And at the very tender young age of 2, the meaning that I made of that was, I'm not seen. I'm not loved. I'm not really well regarded. I mean, I had great evidence for that as a 2-year-old, right? My mom, like, she didn't look after me. Like, of course, she was busy doing her thing in the house. My dad was probably in conversation with the bishop. But how it felt for me was nobody loves me. And that theme has gone on through my life. And it's formed my identity. And ultimately, it's about disconnection. In that moment, there was love and connection, and then there was a disconnection. Now, fast forward, I'm 7 years old. I'm walking back from school in Durban. It's one of those beautiful, hot, muggy days. And I'm walking along Venice Road, off Innis Road, on the Berea. Beautiful jacarandas and frangipanis. I can smell it. And I hear the sound. It's like, Jeez, that sound. I come round the corner, and there, just by the entranceway to my house, is these Zulu guys digging a ditch in unison, in song, pounding, sweating, driving, munching. Wide-eyed little 7-year-old boy, like, wow. And I walked into the house, quiet and cool. My mum was baking in the kitchen. My dad was coming down the stairs, having had a rest after lunch. I was infuriated. This was wrong. Why? Why are these men sweating and working in the hot midday sun, and my mum and dad are just having it easy? And so I insisted to my mother that she helped me to put a tray of lemonade and ice and glasses. And I took it out to these men and I gave it to them. And to this day, I can remember the look of love and appreciation and smiles, these huge men looking down on me. Now, what is it about those stories? Ultimately, they were about connection and disconnection. And it seems to me that the biggest problem we face in the world is disconnection. If you look at what's happening in Gaza, in the Ukraine, in our own families, like I'm over here, you're over there. I'm right, you're wrong. And all of that disconnection creates is conflict, disagreement, and dysfunction. Now, fast forward onto a bus. I'm in Brixton, South London, 1999. I'm waiting on the side of the pavement, and it's 11 o'clock at night. It's an windy October night, fairly drab, grey autumn evening. And because it's a Friday night, there's revelry and laughter and reggae sounds and police sirens and all sorts of people throwing up on the street. It's a Friday night. And this bus pulls up. I get on the bus and I go up it's about 2 kilometers up to the top of Brixton Hill Road. And the moment I get on the bus, I said, there's something, I couldn't put my finger on it. There was something distinctly odd. And I realized it was the contrast between the noise and the activity on the street and the absolute silence in the bus, full to the brim, no one speaking. And so I started thinking, like, why is this? If there were a bunch of 7-year-olds on the bus, we'd be having a riot. So what was going on? And it struck me, fear, a fear of, what will people think of me? I don't want to reach out, and what will happen if? And so I'll just keep myself to myself. Culturally, it's said that it's very English. I don't believe that that's always true. I think as human beings, we live in bubbles that are safe and comfortable. And I thought to myself, I could be sat next to someone who's like a future partner or a band member or someone we could start a business with. But we'll never know because we don't reach out. And then I had this idea, make a speech. Make a speech. It's ridiculous, right? But something just stuck in my head, make a speech. And then started a conversation between what I noticed was two entities. Sorry, let's get to one. I thought that was somewhere else. Hang on a second. I noticed these two voices. The one was what I now see and feel is the voice of the heart, and the other was the voice of the head. And the voice of the heart said, make a speech. What's the worst that could happen, right? You'd have some stories to tell your grandkids. And then the other was the voice, what I now see is, almost like two different voices, like one, the voice of playfulness and expansion and laughter, and the other, the voice of what I call the chattering monkey or the drunken tenant that lives rent-free in our heads. So I noticed these two voices. Make a speech. No, don't. Make a speech. What about this? Make a speech. What will people think? And I noticed that it was actually the voice of my mother, Bridget Ann Reekie. And of course, it wasn't her, but it was what she represented. And I think you'll have your own experience of Bridget Ann Reekie, because what she was saying in my head was, darling, don't. You'll only embarrass yourself. And after all, what will people think? And you know that answer. You know how that sentence finishes, don't you? What will people think? What will people say? And I realized right in that moment that whenever I'd lost power in my life, it was that simple question, I want to do this, what will people think? Well, I conducted that speech and I got up to the front of the bus. And I turned around, I was shaking with fear and adrenaline. I didn't know what I was going to say. I stood up and something magical just happened. It was almost like this magical teleprompter just appeared in front of me. And these words just started to come out of me. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Simon. I'm sober. I'm not on day release from an institution. I'm not about to start talking about Jesus, but I got on this bus and I just noticed such a difference between the aliveness on the street and the quietness in this bus. And so I just want to share a couple of things with you. And I spoke about what mattered to me. I spoke about community. I spoke about love. I spoke about connection. And there was no response whatsoever. Wow. Something inside me said, just keep going. And then I remembered, well, look, Nelson Mandela is relatively recently been released. Everyone knows who Nelson Mandela is. I've got a South African connection because part of what was fueling this experience was I was in the process of going back to South Africa to make a difference, to actually heal a lot of my own wounds, having grown up as a child in South Africa. Nelson Mandela, I said, ladies and gentlemen, what's the difference between Nelson Mandela and you and me? Nothing. He just had a commitment and he didn't stop. And we have commitments, don't we? We want to lose weight. We want to, have an exercise program. We want to start a business. It just gets a bit hard, doesn't it? So we kind of sit on the couch and, wait for the next thing. And in that moment, I saw this young woman elbow what looked like her partner, boyfriend in the ribs. And I knew it was game on. And then, like popcorn, this bus started to pop. People were firing questions at me, asking, why are you doing this? What's going on? What about this? What about that? Magical. I felt like we'd gone from a morgue to a Saturday night live event. And then I look to the back of the bus and I see there's a man standing there. He represents the sum of all my fears. He's 6'5", shaven head. He's got a deep scar down his right cheek. He's got a tattoo across his neck, and underneath the tattoo is written, cut here. As I walk towards him, he puts both his hands either sides of the rails with an absolutely defiant statement. At that point, I remembered, you're an idiot. You had this little moment of middle-class self-expression. And then I realized now, as they say in South Africa, I was in duck. And I actually thought to myself at that time, I remembered a week before someone had been stabbed on a late night bus in Brixton. And now it was all coming to me as I was suddenly painting these pictures of absolute doom and gloom. And I walked towards him and I remember saying to myself, surrender. Surrender. I now come up close into his space. He's now looking directly at me. I can smell the nicotine. I can smell the garlic. I can smell the alcohol on his breath. And he leans into me, right into my face, and he says, words that change my life. He says, mate, there's a lot of people are going to think you're fucking mad. But don't ever, ever stop what you're doing, all right? Now go on in. Fuck off. I did as I was told, and I got off the bus, and I saw this bus pulling away, and it looked like a different bus. It was energy. People were talking to each other. And so one thing led to another. And since then, I've done over 1,000 of these talks. How did it come to be? You know, I'm not going to go through the videos. So why do I do this? Over 1,000 of these talks, why would I put myself through so much pain of actually delivering this talk with the fear of rejection and judgment? Because I realized, I think, that one of the vital missing ingredients as human beings that bonds connection, that bonds us together and brings us together, is having the courage to overcome our fears. So when I did the first talk, I then did it for sporadically over about 10 years, once in a while here, there, feeling like I was completely mad. And then one day I went into a coffee shop in Hout Bay and I saw a little leaflet and it said, write a book in 90 days. I thought my wife was starting to write. She was coming to the end of her medical career. So I gave it to her. And then sure enough, 90 days later, she said, well, I've written my book. So what are you going to do? I knew exactly what I was going to do. I was going to do that bus thing. So I did 90 talks in 90 days, speaking at restaurants, clubs, taxi ranks, aeroplanes, of which the video that I just showed you can see. And what started to show up was a message of just encouraging people to just push into their discomfort and try being a little bit more courageous. And these amazing stories started to come back. The most consistent conversation I would have after doing a talk is someone would come up and go, and I'd say, you know what to do, don't you? And they'd go, and I'd say, good luck. So people, they say when the student is ready, the teacher appears. So what I've discovered about courage is that it's an incredibly powerful force or virtue for transformation. And that's really what I'm going to be speaking about. So some of this text, don't worry about it. So, sometimes, I'm human. I'm just like you with differences, but sometimes I feel like this guy, and then the inside is going, oh, I don't know if I can do this. Like I'm such a failure and things don't work, And I think it's a common voice that we all have, otherwise known as the ego or the drunken monkey or the chirping monkey. And so this is the experience that we have, right? So now skip over this, skip over this, skip. So we're living in a world of fear. For example, suicide, 23 known cases of suicide every day. And for every person that commits suicide, 10 have attempted it. 4 times as many men than women commit suicide, but women attempt suicide more than men. 1 in 4 adults experiences some kind of deep mental diagnosable disorder. There's a lot of shit on the planet, isn't there? There's experiences of how, for example, we are now a global warming sitting at the very highest temperature ever since recorded. Those are the stats there. The world is facing the biggest threat to stability since World War II. And then General Mark Carlton Smith, ex-head of the armed forces, says, I don't see us as the post-war generation. I think the big war is coming. I think our generation in the future will be remembered as the post-war generation. So it doesn't look good, does it? It doesn't feel good. But is it the whole picture? Well, let's see. So for example, the last 20 years, poverty has halved. 80% of the world's 1-year-olds now have been vaccinated against measles. What's going on? But why do we have this experience of complete mayhem out in the world? And yet here we are right now in this conversation together. I mean, my life is pretty reasonable. I'm fed. I have a warm shower. I have a roof over my head. You see, it turns out that really we've got three things against us. One is that there's a personal bias that we have. You know, if I think the world's going to hell in a handbag, well, it is, right? So we have a way that we view the world called the reticular activation system in the brain. Is that, you know, for example, if I said, okay, I want you today to look out for yellow VW beetles. It'll only be a matter of time before you see one, which you wouldn't see before that, right? So we're skewed with what we focus our attention on. We've got a lot of outdated facts. We've got teachers who are teaching our kids who are stuck in 30, 40 years before. The education system is still putting kids in rows and sitting them down when the research says that kids need to move around, they need to tell stories, they need to interact, they need to have conversations, they need to get into dialogue more. And then, of course, there's a news bias. You know, if I believe, you know, in the Conservative Party in the UK, I'm going to buy the Daily Telegraph. If I believe in something else in Labour, I'm going to buy the Observer. And then all of that just feeds into my own bias. So what happens is there are effectively four misconceptions. The first misconception is that everything's getting worse. And this is from a fantastic TED talk by someone called Hans Rosling from a Swedish research business. And what they do is get the stats in terms of what actually is going on in the world. And his TED talk, his most famous TED talk, is called How to Make Sense of the World. So one misconception is everything's getting worse, when actually things are improving from an education point of view, health, wellness, financial, etc. Second misconception is that it's rich and poor. So the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer, when actually what's happening is the two, like the dromedary, is coming together, and there's more of an increase and a joining together of rich and poor. Now we go, oh yeah, but I read this article last week. Hold on, right? And so the misconception is it's first rich and then social, when actually it's social, then rich. Now, this is the evidence that he describes. And the other misconception is that sharks are dangerous. You know, it takes one shark attack in Muizenberg and no one goes for a week. The chances of being attacked again by a shark are so infinitesimally small, we don't even think about it. Yet cigarettes and cars are the two most, the highest chance of death that we have. And we just think nothing about just getting into a car, sometimes drunk as well, right? So the reality is that sharks kill very few people. Now, Steven Pinker wrote a book called The Better Angels of Our Nature, The History of Violence in Humanity. And he, again, backed up what Hans Rosling and his son were saying, is that all the indicators are increasing. Why do we have a sense that they are diminishing? Because of the media. So the job of the media, I was in the media, I was a photojournalist, and our maxim was, if it bleeds, it leads. So we had to find the story that was going to be the most bloodworthy, because that sells, right? So we have this experience of things improving, and then we have the experience of things are improving, but our experiences are not, because of the media. So it's only part of the picture, right? Now, we are still in crisis. It feels like that, doesn't it? And that crisis, I believe, is about separation. You know, so when there was a line from a movie I once heard, which was, when we first meet people, all we see is our differences. And when we get to know them, all we see is our similarities. I heard an incredible conversation between a Palestinian and an Israeli guy the other day, and they started an organization for peace. They had horrendous and heart-wrenching stories of sadness and loss. And yet both of them, as human beings, were completely committed to the same thing. So how do we deal with this? Well, as Bruce Springsteen said, you know, I think it takes coming out of our comfort zones, being a little bit ridiculous. Bruce Springsteen said, I attribute my success to the willingness to not be afraid of making a fool of myself. And this is a very, very hard thing for us to do, because we want the ego. We want to look good. We want to look impressive. We want to look like we got it all handled. But the reality is we really don't have it handled. This was a poster I saw in a cafe in Harfield Village many years ago. It says, "Hello, this is your life speak. You have absolutely no idea what you're doing, do you?" And I think that's about the sum total of it. Yet our egos think we'll live for thousands of years and we'll get to do great things, just not today. And it hasn't happened yet, but we'll keep going. It's all an illusion, the great denial. So how do we make sense of being human? You know, I talk about the wolf pack. Wolf pack is a beautifully sustaining organism that just runs itself. And within a wolf pack, like all of us as human beings, we can be inquisitive and curious and pensive. We can be angry and spiteful. We can be mean and destroying. See, all of these energies are moving within us. You and I both have the capacity to be extraordinary and loving. We also have the capacity to destroy. It depends which wolf we feed. So what is this big problem? The mind. So the mind, as I've said before, is really known as the drunken monkey, and its job is to constantly judge, and it's all about being wired for survival. Our only job as human beings, I would argue, is survival. Now, if we operate from that biological survival place, nothing, really very little becomes possible. It's also called the saboteur. Excuse me. Drunken monkey and the chimpanzee. And here's an example of what our mind might look like in real time. Tell me if you can hear the volume. Just give a thumbs up. Hey, Now that's a funny video, right? It turns out it was actually a piece of guerrilla advertising for Planet of the Apes. But if you look at that monkey, it looks like funny, right? Isn't that what goes on for us as human beings? We have these ideas like, I don't want to be in this relationship anymore. I don't want to, I don't want to start this. I don't want to continue with this business. I want to walk out of my family. We have these ideas, and unfortunately, often we carry them through. So if we're aware of the chimpanzee within us, we can actually have some mastery and facility about how to make the right decisions. Okay, so I'm looking at my time. It's 1:45. What I'm happy to do is, if you're willing to, is just pause there, and then I can, if you're up for it, I can either do this live, or I can do the last kind of 10, 20 or so minutes and record it and send it to you. What do you think?
What is the time?
It's 2:45, just nearly 10 to 12.
Shit. And you've got about another 20 minutes?
Yeah, it's in reality, it's about a 50-minute keynote, actually. I can do an abridged version, but I'm actually, I'm doing it.
Yeah. I can't carry on very much longer, but I like it live though. Do you want to do the live? I don't know, like Monday, or do you want to record it and carry on? Maybe record it, eh? If you're in a flow, keep going, and then just send it to me, and I'll try and watch it at about 3 or 3:30 or whenever I get back.
Oh, fantastic!
Yeah,
good stuff.
Yeah, dude. Okay, look, I mean, sure, lots of thoughts, lots of great stuff, lots of stuff which I think maybe needs tightening. But yeah, you've come a long way. You've got it all down there, hey? Carry on. Okay, so I'll jump off. I'll go and do my meeting, and just send it to what, like via, I don't know how Zoom works, but you'll carry on sending it to me. Plus send me this as well, what
Yeah,
we've done so far, yeah?
for sure.
So it'll be a full piece.
Awesome, man. I
Awesome,
need
dude.
to stop it now and then start another one. So I'll send you 2 videos.
Okay. Okay, 2 videos. Yeah.
Sweet,
Cool,
man.
Si.
Thanks,
Thank you
brother.
so much. Man. See you later. Bye. Leave. Click, leave. Yeah.